Hi, everyone. I'm Daphna Blatt, Senior Director of Strategy and Public Impact here at the New York Public Library. In this role, I work with my team and colleagues across the library to identify, articulate, and maximize the library's impact on the communities it serves, which also means that I'm a bit of an evangelist for the magic of public libraries. I'm very excited to be here today with all of you and to share a bit about our library's impact assessment, articulation, and maximization work with all of you. Like many delightful things in this world, the New York Public Library is a hybrid creature. It combines a network of 88 branch libraries in neighborhoods across the New York City boroughs of Manhattan, the Bronx, and Staten Island, with 4 premier research centers serving a global audience of researchers. So today, I will briefly share some case studies of my team, the library's strategy and public impact team's work, which I hope will give you a sense of the diversity and the scale of our efforts to measure and articulate library impact at every level, from individual outcomes facilitated by specific programs to community level impact driven by the institution overall. The first few case studies will focus on our circulating branch libraries. We'll cover case studies about monitoring the equity of children's book borrowing, understanding the nature of our early literacy impact, and articulating and helping patrons see and experience our civic impact. And our last case study will focus on the research side of our house, exploring ways that our team has worked to articulate the impact of scholarly works made at NYPL, which is to say using our spaces, our research collections, and our experts. Let's turn to our first case study, monitoring the equity of children's book borrowing. Many of you may be familiar with the model of impact that moves hierarchically and sequentially from inputs to outputs, up to outcomes, and then impact. We chose this first example to illustrate how a rigorous analysis outputs, in this case, the differential borrowing patterns of children's books across our service area, can actually serve as an important indicator of impact, pointing to strategic opportunities for the library. New York City includes some of the richest and the poorest neighborhoods in our entire country. Like most cities in the US, it has a high degree of income inequality. On the left side of this slide is a heat map showing the relative degree of poverty and affluence across our service area, which I'll orient you to now. The long, skinny slice on the bottom here is Manhattan. Above it is the Bronx. And in this insert, not to scale because it's very big, is Staten Island, our third borough. The darker the blue on this map, the greater that neighborhood's poverty level. The right side of this slide is another heat map of our service area, this time showing the per capita borrowing rates for children's books at one particular point in time during the pandemic. The darker the red on this map, the higher the rate of children's book borrowing. So, as you can see, the color scales of these two maps are almost exact inverses of each other. In other words, the areas with the darkest blue, the highest poverty, have the lightest red, the lowest degree of per capita children's book borrowing, and vice versa. Now again, book circulation is traditionally an output measure But norming this output measure to a per capita basis and comparing its patterns across our neighborhoods has produced what we believe is a crucial impact measure, namely a measure of the equity of library usage across our service area. And given the established connection between children's early experience and exposure to books at home and their academic performance years later, that makes it a proxy impact measure for one of our library's core values, equity of opportunity. So with this impact measure and our ongoing efforts to keep an eye on how it's changing over time, which it is, we secured our leadership's commitment to allocate additional resources to begin addressing the disparities that we see so starkly in these visualizations. Let's move on to our second case study, understanding the nature of our early literacy impact. This is actually a case study that builds on the previous one. Like most American public libraries, we offer a robust set of early literacy programs for children aged 0 to 5, with 60% of caregivers self-reporting that they bring their children to these story times and other early literacy programs at least once a week. Yet, while we measure early literacy outcomes for caregivers and for children, we're still trying to more precisely understand the nature and the mechanisms of benefit that a relationship with the library for families with young children. The in-depth qualitative research that we've already embarked on with families about their reading ecosystems has yielded interesting insights into how a family's relationship with the library, one, evolves over a lifetime, two, is often influenced by parents' reading ecosystems and library usage in their own childhoods, and three, can include less obvious social and emotional impacts, such as affording families, both the caregivers and the children, the opportunity to develop informal social support networks at the library, which in turn create an association between literacy and fun, which in turn can positively impact children's school readiness. But this research has only whetted our appetites for still more ethnographic research to more precisely understand causal effects and articulate the library magic that happens at story time and beyond for children of this age. We're currently trying to figure out the best way to turn this core research objective into questions that we can present to our patrons, both in surveys and in in-depth ethnographic conversations and interviews. Our hypothesis is that the library's impact on families' early literacy development exists on a spectrum. On one end, our relationship with some families might be described as replaceable. So the library is just one of many places that support their child's early literacy development. But that family could easily achieve the same results without the library, hence replaceable. In the middle of the spectrum that we hypothesize, our relationship with some families might be described as additive. So the library helps these families do more of what they were already doing. For instance, letting them read many more books per week than they could afford to buy themselves. And at the farthest end of this hypothesized spectrum, our relationship with some families might be transformative. In other words, our programs, our staff, our collections, our spaces, the experience of being at the library might expose caregivers and their children to knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors to which they otherwise would not have had access. Now, why would it matter to know where on this spectrum different families fall? First, because it would help us tailor our early literacy programs for maximum caregiver learning and maximum child development. Second, because it would help us target neighborhoods where we're most likely to have transformational impact, which we hypothesize will be those highest poverty, darkest blue areas we saw on the map a few slides ago. Last year, our team surveyed over 500 parents and caregivers who attended story time in our branches with their children. The results of this survey bore out our hypothesis, indicating that parents with lower income and or lower educational attainment levels were, one, the parents most likely to describe their library relationship as transformative, and two, the parents more likely than those with higher income and education levels to agree that attending library story times has made them more comfortable talking to their children while sharing a book together, and also has shown them more ways to help their children understand and use new words. So we're continuing to research these impacts through another round of surveys and a planned round of ethnographic reviews, which will be fielded in a few weeks, as well as later this year. Our next case study and our last case study focusing on our circulating branch libraries focuses on articulating and helping our patrons see and experience the civic impact of our library and of all public libraries. Our work in this arena is grounded in two main convictions. One, that public libraries, simply by virtue of existing, have an inherent civic impact. And two, that everyday library usage, like borrowing a book or attending a program or simply being in a public space that welcomes everyone, is actually an important form of civic engagement. At their best, library interactions can positively influence patrons' broader relationships with public institutions, with shared resources, with other community members, and with themselves. So one of our goals is to give people civic lenses through which to view the library and their library experience. Meaning, our goal is to make library's civic impact more visible to our community members, to our elected officials and other external stakeholders, and even to our own staff. Some of this happens through messaging and communication, some happens through programming, and some of this happens through intentionally shaping our patrons' experiences and relationships with the library. We believe that public libraries, all of us, are the triple threat of civic infrastructure. Not only do we provide grounded civic infrastructure in our physical spaces, but we also provide two other kinds. One, portable civic infrastructure through our circulating materials, which cross between public and private domains, back and forth. Another kind of civic infrastructure that public libraries is invisible. It's in the relations that we establish with and within our communities. Every time we connect private people in public spaces, we reinforce a sense of we that can nourish broader community mindedness. Every time we send public things into private spaces, We reinforce a sense of ours that can nourish community member support for other bigger things, like our cities, like our planet. And every time we model positive relationships between public institutions like libraries and the individuals who use them, we positively impact the way community members see themselves and relate to the civic sphere. And we do this, our library, in every public library, every hour of every day that we're open. So we're building on this foundational civic impact with strategic investments in creating a portfolio of programmatic experiences and opportunities for our patrons to feel more powerful and more connected. One example of this kind of experience is a new program that we're incubating here in our branches for our youngest patrons, a regularly occurring library initiations for children that celebrates their getting their library as their initiation into public life. We're designing a fun and meaningful collective experience that aims to activate children's identity, citizens, and as stewards of shared resources, beginning with library books and radiating outward from there. Our last case study focuses on our research labs, and specifically on articulating the reverberating impact of the scholarly and creative projects produced using our research library's resources. Every new work that draws from our libraries, or indeed any research library's collections and resources, enriches our collective culture by engaging in an ongoing dialogue with other works and other authors across place and across time, extending the legacy of works from the past and inspiring the creation of works in the future. Here is a data visualization of one example of that dialogue and that ongoing impact. It takes as its unit of analysis a book written in one of our research library fellowship programs called the Coleman Center Fellowship. These fellowship programs leverage our research library collections, spaces, and expert staff. The book, called Melville, His World and Work, is a biography of the American author Herman Melville, written by Andrew Delphi. From its 2005 publication through today, over 230 subsequent scholarly books and articles, each of the colored circles that you see here, have cited this book as a source for their own work. And these titles, each one of these circles, were then themselves cited by another 450 books and articles. And the number of these second generation citations determine the size of each circle that you see here. This analysis also illustrates this one book's radiating influence across different fields of study. Naturally, it has served as an authoritative source for other works about Melville and related authors, so that's all the red and the yellow circles that you see here. But also, it has served as an authoritative reference for works covering literature more broadly, so that's all the green circles down below, as well as such diverse fields, history, law, and philosophy. All these blue circles that you see in the bottom. We actually displayed this data visualization in a public exhibition held in our flagship research library, where we're speaking to you from today, to celebrate our institution's 125th anniversary. It served as an important component of our public storytelling around the library's impact in our city and beyond. Here's another visualization of that same analysis, just at a broader, sort of higher level. It's actually a constellation of first and second generation citations arising from the nonfiction publications from 20 years of that Coleman-Winter Research Fellowship that I mentioned earlier. Collectively, works from these fellows have been cited as sources by 20,000 subsequently published books and articles. And here is a slightly different take on the reverberating impact of works created at the New York Public Library that we also produced for the public exhibition I mentioned previously. It takes as its unit of analysis the feminine mystique, a foundational text of second wave feminism published in the 60s. This book examines the lives of mid-20th century white, middle-class American women who describe themselves as unhappy despite material comfort. It was written by Betty Friedan when she was a researcher in the New York Public Library's Frederick Lewis Allen room in the late 1950s. And it drew on items in our library's general research division. First published in 1963, it is still read by and taught to students in colleges and universities across the United States. Evidence of how nonfiction works created at the library become authoritative sources for study and touchstones in the transmission of knowledge and skill building across generations of students. This book influence radiates across academic disciplines as well. It appears in more than 1,000 syllabi at nearly 400 American academic institutions. While it most frequently appears in syllabi for history courses, it is also used as a text in political science, literature, and women's studies classes. And collectively, works from that 20-year cohort of our Coleman Center Fellows here at the Research Library are held at 3,600 US academic libraries, that's all of the purple circles that you see here, and have been taught at 460 US colleges and universities in the country. That's the red circles that you see throughout this map. So we've come to the official end of our case studies, and thank you for all of your time and attention.